Hello, students. Welcome to lecture number 10 of our Global Business Management lecture series. Today, we're going to start off by talking about the various documentation that you need in your export transaction, specifically in your supply chain. So let's look at that documentation. Now, I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly, but these are examples of documents that you're going to need. Here's the overview. Let's go into them one by one. Obviously, you recall that a pro forma invoice is basically a quote. It is not the final invoice, but when you send it to the customer, hey, this is the amount that we will charge you if you purchase from us, and send a purchase order. Key elements, again, I'm going to let you read through these on your own. I'm not going to sit here and read slides for you. Don't forget, in these items, you need to have the harmonized system codes in them. All right. Next would be the commercial invoice. You should be looking at the that's the follow-up, if you will. The invoice that you're going to send to the customer after you have manufactured and shipped. You see all the instructions information has to be in it for these persons. I'll let you read through that. Here's the key elements you have to include in it. Keep in mind that if you're let me delete that. I apologize. If your company already has a form commercial invoice or pro forma invoice, you may need to add some things for international shipments. For example, currency. Which currency is it in? So there's no question on that. The harmonized code number. Also, sometimes we put in what's known as the destination control statement. For example, if you are selling items that are on the um, United States munitions list. And again, I'm using the US examples. If you're in another country, you will have similar regulations in your country. But here we have the destination control statement that one adds to your invoice if you are selling slash shipping these types of goods. So basically, it is telling people it can only go to this country and this end user. You're not allowed to reship it to someone else beyond who is receiving this. Very important because you don't want to have legal liability for someone in another country taking your military slash defense articles and then turn around and shipping them on to another country. So this shows that you're taking good faith steps to advise that customer that they are not authorized to resell that in violation of US law. Some customers require another form of a commercial invoice. Canada has a custom invoice. Caribbean countries do as well. So you'll have to check with your customers to see if there's another kind. Obviously, with your shipment, you will have a packing list that is going to have these specific items. Now, you have to have this information because it could get stuck in customs. Uh, it could be seized, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to make sure you have this information on your packing list. Now, some customers and some imports will require what's known as certificate of origin, and you are essentially saying where you're certifying, if you will, where this was manufactured. This is a lot more common outside the US than it is here. But for example, you can go get this form, fill it out, and actually go to your local Chamber of Commerce to have it certified. In other words, the origin was the US, if that's the case. I won't go through this too much, but there's also a thing called the FTA certificate of origin that under free trade agreements, you often have to include to verify under these free trade agreements that it originated from a country that permits lower or zero import duties. Certificate of free sale. I have never used this forever, and just specifically in my international trade, but Some foreign governments might require it, might be issued by the Food and Drug Administration. And so some countries might require that for the importation, for example, of food. Shipper's letter of instruction. That's nice because it tells the freight forwarder, this is specifically what you need to do for me. This is where I want it to go, et cetera, et cetera. You notice it has a limited power of attorney statement, which we talked about last week, that gives your authority to the importer, customs broker on the import side, to import on your behalf. We'll skip that one. Let's go to again, there's a relisting of it. Now, here's additional certificates. This is what's known as the inland bill of lading. If I'm taking something from my uh, facility, my manufacturing plant to the port, I'm going to have this inland bill of lading, which tells who can pick it up, et cetera, et cetera, but how to handle the shipment before it gets to the port. Now, once I get it to the port, of course, I'm going to get an ocean bill of lading from the ship company about the goods that I have on its ship. This is basically a contract of carriage, but more important, it is also a document of title, which means whoever has this gets to pick it up. So after the ship captain gives me my ocean bill of lading, I forward it to my customer so they can pick up the goods on the other side. Now, straight, that just means it goes to the consignee, the person who's to receive on the end. The some distributors, for example, might want to have it negotiable where they can just have already sold this to a customer and a customer can come pick it up. It's known as negotiable, so it could be signed over to someone else. Airway bills, similar to the way bills we've already talked about, or bill of ladings we've talked about. I won't get into negotiable versus non-negotiable. We talked about last week about certain uh, symbols and whatnot you have to designate if you are transporting dangerous goods. And again, you've already seen the symbols. Well, here you see a form that you also have to uh, file, and this permits the shippers to know what is being shipped, how to handle it, how to address it, etc. Bank draft, we'll talk about this in uh, the collections period, but basically, this is a reverse check. And I've just thrown it in here because this is often a document you used in international sale transactions. All right, now let's go to, I'll have you review these things. This is basically an overview of the things that NASBITE wants you to be familiar with. We've also talked about these. For some items, you do need an export license if it's going to a prohibited country, embargoed country, prohibited person, that is person or country. It is, for example, a defense article that has to have a license, etc. So that you would have to have that license for goods or services that require a license for U.S. export, again, using the U.S. as example. You also see above that the EEI that you have to file for goods above such and such amount. That theoretically is for calculating the amount of exports from the US and for other licensing reasons. The destination control statement we talked about. Next, let's see. These are some certificates that you might have to, or excuse me, some documentation you might provide to the customer based on what the transaction includes. We already talked about the shipper's export declaration. It doesn't have to be filed. Packing list, letter of credit. Some customers want that to accompany, and that is if you're financing or someone has issued a letter of credit to ensure payment, ensure shipment / performance, etc. Some customers are going to want you to ship that, send that letter of credit. Conversely, if they're using a letter of credit to support their payment to you, you want to make sure you have that in hand before you ship so you know you're going to get paid. Insurance certificate, when you give that to the ship captain, it may well prove that you have retained insurance for the cargo that they are carrying. You see this certificate. If you're doing food, pharmaceuticals, etc., you'll need this certificate. Hazardous material, same thing. If you're sending hazardous material, and you see the last one that has to do with plant-based products. Okay, we covered all those. We covered that. Like I said, some of this is redundant based on who is in NASBITE is uh, editing or writing a specific section. Here's some examples. Just wanted you to see, we've seen it again, but here's another example of a packing list. Now here's a dock receipt. So when the carrier takes the shipment, you will get this and also the bill of lading. That's just another example for you to look at. Cover this, cover this. As a review, you do need to um, ensure whether or not your product requires licensing, an export license before sending it. We've talked about that in a previous week. We also talked about regulations involving specific type of products. So you might want to look at that, watch that video if you have food, animal, etc. We've also talked about Incoterms, so I won't bother again, but let me show you that chart again. Why we bring it up again this week is that you determine with your customer who is paying for, and by paying, even if you back charge the customer, but who is paying for insurance, packaging, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure you have that Incoterms done. All right. Just a term I'd like you to know is USPPI. That's if you're shipping the goods, even if you use a freight forwarder, you're basically the person slash company who is responsible for making appropriate representations to government entities. Covered that and that. We have covered that. And I apologize, but again, these are things that are redundant based on who drafted these. Don't forget the fumigation certificate if you're using, for example, a wooden pallet, wooden crates, etc., so that it can get into the country. It won't get into the country if you don't have that in many countries because they think it's not fumigated and they don't want these pests to get into their local economy and environment. Um, Import compliance, similar. We're going to talk about that more in a subsequent week, but these are the type of things, again, that you will see coming into the country if you are purchasing. Again, this is just an overview because we're going to show you in a subsequent week. Don't forget, many countries have a foreign language requirement. Let's say, for example, I'm shipping into Canada. My product and certain documentation must be in both English and French, for example. Make sure that you know the language requirements before you ship. All right. Well, that was fast, but that is it for week 10. And just please review the materials on your own, watch the videos if they are hypertext links for things in there. And I will see you again next week. Thanks.